everyone. I'm Tyler King, and this is In the Know, your number one source for anything and everything cannabis related in the great state of Florida. Today, I'm joined by Erik, the CEO of ART420 and board chair for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself and his companies, and I would like to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
It's a pleasure. Always fun to be back in Gainesville. I spent quite a bit of time traveling up here and visiting during college, so it's always great when I can make it back to Gainesville.
Awesome. Well, let's start by giving a little introduction about yourself and how you got to be in the industry.
How I came to the industry is always a fun question for me to answer. You know, prior to getting into the industry, my background was in higher education, so I worked at the University of Miami, at the University of Central Florida. I was a college advisor, helping kids get into college and get through college and get on to employment. And I had quite a bit of success with that. I enjoyed doing that. But the entire time that I was there, I began to realize that perhaps I wasn't using my full potential and I wasn't following my passion. And so my wife and I began to sit down and dream a little bit and think about what our plans for the future would be. And we were paying attention to what was happening around the country when it came to cannabis. And so we sat down and we brainstormed idea after idea, and we came up with tons of ideas. But we weren't ready to quite jump feet first into the industry. We were a little hesitant. And, to be honest, when we first looked at the industry, we didn't think there would be a place for us. We didn't think there would be an opportunity for us to be able to obtain the capital to go after a license, or, we didn't have the know-how, and so on. So, there were a lot of barriers to entry into this industry. And so, we thought long and hard before, we actually jumped in. And we happened to go on vacation to Colorado for a ski trip. And we were there in Colorado and enjoyed Colorado. And, one of the things that is interesting about when you visit anywhere in Colorado now, because of, them being the grand social experiment in our country, it's legal. So everybody's impacted by it, whether you supported it or voted for it or not, whether you use it or not. It's a part of your everyday life. You're impacted by it. You're connected to someone who's impacted by it. And so as we would visit shops and restaurants and, we would have a beer at the end of the slopes and so on, people would share their stories. And surprisingly, those stories sounded very familiar to the stories that, I had heard here in Florida, where it was still illegal. People who had a roommate in college who sold it in order to pay for books to pay their way through college, or, someone who had a boss who they on the weekends hang out and they use cannabis, or, someone who had a parent or an aging loved one who used cannabis for some type of ailment. And, we began to think about those stories, and we really were a little bit surprised, because those were common stories from Colorado to Florida, yet the mainstream media painted a picture that cannabis users were lazy, unproductive, and so we looked at that and we said, we want to be able to present a different message, a counter message, if you will, to prohibition. And that's when ART420 began. About 2 weeks after returning home from that trip, we filed the papers, and ART420 was born, and we began to push for our first show. And ART420 was established, like I said, to challenge the stereotypes of cannabis users, and at the same time present a counter message and the real lived experiences and stories about who cannabis users are. And so we try to tell a different story through the art. We try to present that image, of, what cannabis users are, the lawyers, the doctors, they're your neighbors, they're everybody. But the mainstream media will have you believe, otherwise. And so we're using the art to be able to change that.
Absolutely. I know when we first met at the green carpet event here in Gainesville, we kind of do this, share the same mantra, same mindset, trying to bridge those demographics through art. Not everybody perks their ears up at the word cannabis, but most people perk their ears up at the word of art. Everybody loves art, whether it's
Absolutely.
music, canvas, glass. There's all different forms of art. So you can bring all those demographics together and then use that base to educate them on cannabis in the industry.
I mean, and that's exactly what we do. You know, when I think about our first annual show, all the way to our last show, which was last December, you know, we brought in, we try to be very deliberate about what how we use the art to tell that story. So, for instance, I brought in the Rastafarian community, and I had them there to, present a cultural, experience, and it allowed them to, they brought in their drums, they, did their music and chanted, and they've read from the Bible. They talked about how, ganja for them is a part of their culture. It's a healing herb. It's a holy sacrament, and it's not about getting high. It's not about which strain can get me the highest, and and so on. So we wanted to present that message to the general public, because most people, when they associate folks with dreadlocks or Jamaicans, it's always, again, lazy, unproductive, not a part of mainstream society, and no value in what they bring to the table. And so we bring artists like that in. I have another artist. When you come to the art show, you'll see some of the pieces, as soon as you see the artwork, you know what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
You see a bud or a cannabis flower or someone smoking, and you have you don't have to guess what we're talking about. But I have other pieces of art that never show cannabis, that never show anyone smoking. One of the artists that we work with was born a quadriplegic, suffers from cerebral palsy. Literally, without cannabis, he can't steady his hand to create art.
Oh, wow.
But when you see his art, you'll never see cannabis in it.
Okay.
We use his art to be able to again show that this is a medical, it has medical properties to it. And this person, when you see him, he spoke at our last show. You can see his physical ailments. You can see the struggle he goes through in just communicating. And then it's very difficult to then call him lazy or unproductive.
Absolutely.
Or criminal. It allows you to begin to get a different picture of who cannabis users are.
Yeah, use that story behind the art to bring that to light. And so Minorities for Medical Marijuana, tell us a little bit about that.
So how I got involved with Minorities for Medical Marijuana, it all stems from the art for me. The ART420 was the first thing we started, and as I was going around promoting our show, I would go to different cannabis conferences and cannabis events, and I noticed very quickly that between my wife and I was we can count on one hand the number of African Americans or minorities in the room, and initially, I'll be quite honest, it wasn't a primary focus of mine at the time, but I attended a conference here in Orlando, and as I was leaving the conference, one of the keynote speakers, who happened to be a doctor, has written books on cannabis and everything, he comes up to me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, "Hey, a black guy with dreads, where are the rest of you?" And really? When you first hear that, you're taken aback. But what he meant by that was, your community has been literally destroyed because of the war on drugs, because of this plant. Why are you guys not taking the opportunities to be a larger force in this industry? And he went on to be one of my greatest supporters. He's supported ART420 and connected us to resources since then. And from there is when I'm a person of obligation, and I recognized then that I needed to use my platform to educate minorities about what was happening in the industry, what was happening in our state. And so during our second annual show, we planned what we called the Black Market Brunch. Okay. And I brought in a grower from Oregon. I brought in Michael Minority. I brought in the local chapter president for the ACLU. Okay. I brought in a black entrepreneur who owns Cannabis Investment Magazine. I brought in, Roz McCarthy, who's the founder of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I brought in as many resources as I could to educate, people of color about what was going on. And from there is when I became the board director for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And this was in 2016, just before we passed the law. Oh, wow. And so, at the time, Roz, the founder of the organization, had already begun partnering with United for Care at the time. So she was kind of playing a role in the industry already. And so we were invited to their watch party on election night. And so we were there when we found out that our state had passed overwhelmingly to expand medical marijuana in our state. And so we were very, very excited. But I turned to Roz at that party and I told her, I said, this is great and this is a win and we should celebrate this. But this is only the beginning, and we have to be in Tallahassee. Yeah. We have to be at the table to make sure that someone is there fighting on behalf of us, because in 2014, when no one was there, the rules that they enacted, having to have a farm for over 30 years, grow over 400,000 plants, $5 million performance bond, those are things that are only going to create more barriers to access to the industry. And so we showed up in Tallahassee and we fought hard. And we were very successful. We were able to get the diversity language included into Florida's medical marijuana bill. So that's awesome. Now all of the license holders in our state, current and even those who are seeking a license, have to submit a diversity plan and talk about how diversity will be a priority from equity on down to staffing and contracts. So now we're working around the country. We've expanded to 16 different states, and we're looking to replicate what we did here in Florida in those states.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've worked with a couple of your partners in the past. Cheryl, she's great.
Absolutely.
She's been to more than and Canna Headhunters. She's doing great with that.
Absolutely.
So real quick, tell us a little bit about how the audience can get a hold of you on social media, websites, and what events you've got coming up.
Absolutely. So you can reach us in many, many different ways. ART420, you can go to our website. That's ART420 with the letters spelled out, not using the numbers, art420.com. You can also email us at info@art420.com. With Minorities for Medical Marijuana, you can get a hold of us. We are a membership-based organization, so we invite you to join us and fight for diversity, not just here in the state of Florida, but around the country. You can go to our website, that is mmunited.org. Again, that's mmunited.org. And you can find us. There's quite a bit of events that we'll be having going on throughout the year with ART420. Look for us in August to have a cannabis charity race benefiting We Are Rare, the Epilepsy Foundation, and Mission Zero.
Oh, awesome.
So that'll be coming up. We'll also be releasing our artist call for our 4th annual ART420 Cannabis-Inspired Art Show, which will take place in December in Miami. With Minorities for Medical Marijuana, you can look out for a number of things. May 10th is our 2nd anniversary. We've only been around for 2 years.
Congratulations.
So we're actually going to have a big blowout party down in Miami. We invite all of you guys to come out. So look out for some information on that coming up soon. We'll be doing some community forums with some of the state legislators that we work with during session. So you'll look out for those. We'll be in different cities doing those as well. And expungement clinics, look out for that. That's something that we're really putting a lot of effort into this year, to set up expungement clinics around the country, to make sure that as this new industry is coming online, individuals who've been arrested and who've had to face criminal penalties because of this industry, the illegal industry, are now being able to have their records cleaned and potentially participate in this industry, or at the very least get a job to be able to support themselves and their families.
That's awesome. I know a lot of people's lives have been detrimentally affected by stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
That's awesome that you're trying to help those people out.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to thank you for being here today. Taking
Thank
time
you.
out of your day.
I appreciate it, man. And I can tell you from on behalf of Minorities for Medical Marijuana, we appreciate you all for supporting us, for supporting diversity. We recognize that as an organization, it takes a full community in order to be successful, and we thank you guys for being a part of that community with us.
Awesome. Well, this pleasure is all mine.
All righty.
Have a good one.